Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishrealm and I'm back with another video. So as you can see by the title, I am here to talk about something that I have been doing for like the past couple of years. And I decided to pull some of this information together and talk a little bit about my experience reading a lot of nonfiction political books about the Trump presidency. And I say a lot, but it's 5. But every time I read one, people are like, how are you reading so many books about the Trump presidency? And it's just intriguing. I think that if I was not a history major, I would have done something related to politics. I don't know, like I think I would have enjoyed that. So that's probably why I was so keen on picking up some of these books, and I just keep reading them and reading them and reading them. And at the point of filming this video, I have 2 more that I actually want to read that I already have checked out from Libby, so they won't be included in this video, but hopefully I will get through them this year. So if you aren't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you click the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications if you want to never miss a video from me, and go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. So I'm actually really curious about how many like not so great comments I may get for this video, because I don't know what type of attention it's going to draw, but we're just gonna go with it. Like, it's kind of whatever at this point. I'll be really interested in seeing whether this gets pushed out into other areas outside of BookTube. Hopefully not, fingers crossed that it won't, but there's always that possibility. So I'm trying to prepare myself for that, because a lot of people are not gonna necessarily be happy with what I'm saying, but these are things that I learned after reading 5 books about the Trump presidency. So the 5 books that I did end up reading included Fear, Rage, and Peril, which is known as the Trump trilogy by Bob Woodward. I also read Midnight in Washington by Schiff, and then I read Betrayal, the final act of the Trump show by Karl. So I did not realize with this last book, the final act of the Trump show, which was Betrayal, I did not realize that this was the second part to a book that he had written on the first part of Trump's presidency. So I will go back and listen to the first part of it, but I did end up reading the second part, which was super informative. And so, as I have said with this book, it does cover the second half of Trump's presidency, more so in that final year of his presidency. So his COVID response, and then what happened with the insurrection on January 6th, as well as just some other tidbits of information in there. Now, with Bob Woodward's trilogy, Fear is the book that covered the first half of his presidency, probably right up into the point of the Russian or the Russia collusion whole situation. The second part really covers his COVID response, and that book is Rage. And then the third book, Peril, covers the very end of his presidency, and then it steeps into Biden's first little bit into his administration. So we get to see a little bit of Biden, but I'm not going to talk about that. I probably will end up doing something similar with all the books that are probably going to come out about the Biden administration. I think this could end up being kind of a series if I keep reading as much political nonfiction as I've been reading lately, which we're here for it. We love to see it. Now, what's interesting about all of these books is that some of this information can really be considered repetitive, for the simple fact that they do rehash information that has been available to the general public through media. However, what I loved about reading all of these is that it's always interesting to see how the writer perceives the presidency. And you know, you have most people, Schiff of course is a part of the US government, and then you have Bob Woodward and Karl who work in media. But I think that even still, you kind of get a taste, as non-biased as they may attempt to be. Schiff's is a little less on the non-biased side because it is about his personal experience. But at least with Karl and Bob Woodward, they are laying the facts on the table. But it's just very interesting to talk about their experiences having to deal with the Trump presidency and his cabinet and everyone that, you know, was around him. They have to insert some of that information because it is pertinent to the story. So you still get varying tidbits of information about Trump depending upon whose lens you're reading from. Now, all of these books contain hundreds of sources. There were lots and lots of people who were interviewed, whether on the record or off the record. Trump was even interviewed as part of Bob Woodward's book Rage, which made the book even more dynamic for me because we were actually hearing specifically from Trump and not someone's perception of what he was saying. And then Jonathan Karl's book was even more interesting on audio because he actually decided to insert sound bites from media responses that he was getting when he was in a press room or whatever the case can be. It just made the story really, really intriguing. So there are 5 specific things that I learned while reading this. I mean, I learned a lot more, but there were 5 things that I wanted to focus in on, and I'm going to delve a little bit into them. I didn't want to make this video too long because I can go on and on and on and on and on about these books, and I have actually talked about each one of these books in detail in wrap-ups and reviews, so I'll make sure that I link all that stuff down in the description box below. I won't use the card symbol because of the simple fact that I'm not going to be talking about each book individually. I'm going to be talking about what I learned as a whole by reading all 5 of these books. So the first thing that I have learned, which I think a lot of you probably also know, is that Trump had no working knowledge of politics before he entered into the race to become president. When he became president, it became even more apparent that he had no working knowledge of politics whatsoever. He ran his presidency off of business tactics. And that's clear. He's a businessman now. His level of success as a businessman is up for debate. There's a lot of information that's been coming out about that lately, especially some stuff that was even talked about in Jonathan Karl's books, like his name was worth more money than anything in this world. Like, the success of whether he was a good business individual is definitely up in the air, but we do see that this presidency was definitely more of a business type of maneuver. So because of this, it was no surprise that we saw a lot of missteps in his presidency, and he's not the first president and he won't be the last president to make missteps. I'm not saying that it's unusual that he made missteps, but it was a good look at why these missteps were made, because he didn't have the knowledge that was needed in order to make the best decisions, because he had not been involved in politics before. I think in one of the books, in Bob Woodward's first book, it was interesting because we get some tidbits of information about what it was like when he first ran, and there is a strong lack of knowledge. Like, at one point he was voting Dem, and there's nothing wrong with switching parties, but I don't even think he understood the implications for then wanting to run on a Republican platform and not really having voted for an extensive period of time and how that looked, just not knowing like voting records are available. It's very intriguing. And like I said before, this doesn't excuse his deplorable behavior. Not knowing is not an excuse for not doing the right thing or trying to get the knowledge to do the right thing, but it's interesting when we look at it in the context of how much his cabinet had to do to try to make sure the entire framework of this country wasn't just completely like destroyed. Although when you look at Adam Schiff's book, it becomes even more intriguing because according to him, we almost did lose the framework of our democracy when you look at it through the lens of the insurrection, and that this entire democracy is still at risk because of the after effects of this presidency. The second thing that was interesting to look at is that there are politicians who definitely took advantage of the fact that Trump had no working knowledge of any type of politics whatsoever. They were happy to swarm in and really, you know, make sure that they were elevated in their positions because of someone's lack of knowledge. And when I think about politicians who took advantage of this situation, I namely think about Lindsey Graham. So Lindsey Graham is an interesting politician. He's been in politics for an extremely long period of time, and I always find it interesting to see how close he got to Trump, considering how much of a fallout they had prior to Trump becoming president. So there is a so-called incident where Trump gave out Lindsey Graham's telephone number, and there was a big spiel over that. I don't know how true that incident is. I never saw the video for it, so I don't know how true that is. But one video that I always watch is when Lindsey Graham went on Trevor Noah's show, and he was talking about the fact that Trump was a racist, he was ignorant, he was just a deplorable human being. And he even at one point told Trevor Noah, like, you know, do you have your green card? And Trevor Noah, of course, jokingly said no. And he said, I mean, if I were you, I would run, you know, like, you're black and you're an immigrant, like, he's not gonna like that. So to have such strong opinions about this man, and it's a game of politics, this is what politics is all about. It's such a strong opinion of this man, yet here we are, and we learn in one of the books, I can't remember if it was Rage or if it was Fear. It was one of the two of those books where we find out that there were moments when Trump was calling Lindsey Graham at like 12 o'clock in the morning to help him make decisions about things. He was getting coached by him. He relied on him. He was like his voice of insight when it came to the world of politics. And to see a man as being so deplorable to then all of a sudden becoming his right-hand man and really just pushing this man to act in such egregious manners because it elevates your position. It shows how much people were willing to do and take advantage of his lack of knowledge for their own personal benefit and gain. I mean, this was evident, I believe, in all of the books that I read. I mean, not just Bob Woodward's trilogy, but also Midnight in Washington, and then also, you know, the what is it, Betrayal, the final act in the Trump show. I'm just going to call it Betrayal because that whole title is extremely too long. I think in Betrayal, I saw another interesting dynamic where, you know, like Mitch McConnell knew that Trump was not doing great things, but by keeping that close bond with Trump, he was able to get things done that he wanted to get done. And I think about the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett and how RBG had asked that they not really confirm another Supreme Court justice in the midst of an election period, and that it would be extremely controversial to do so, and that it didn't need to happen then. And of course, Mitch McConnell was like, you know, you need to go ahead and confirm her. And even Trump was like, I would rather interview more people, but Mitch McConnell was like, no, you need to go ahead and confirm her. And it was about a balancing act of power. If she was confirmed, then the Supreme Court justices, it'd be more right-leaning than left. And, you know, that was when they had this celebration in the Rose Garden and people were invited. And Jonathan Karl had said it like, because the White House had been so lax with COVID restrictions that he opted to actually not attend, and that he would report from a different area of the grounds, which I think he reported from like the front of the White House. And how he found out, or he talked to Mitch McConnell and was like, you know, he was invited. Mitch McConnell was like, oh, they've been super lax with COVID response, and so I'm not gonna, you know, go out there. And it's interesting, like, yes, I get you don't want to go out there because of COVID response, but they are out there celebrating something that you put into effect, a bug that you put into his ear, because you wanted to make sure that the Supreme Court was more right-leaning than left. And that to me is just amazing, that in all of these books I was learning about so many different politicians who were willing to do whatever they needed to do to maintain. And these are people who are supposed to be serving the people, but they're serving their own self-interest. And I say that about both parties, not just Republicans, but both Republicans and Democrats will do stuff that is self-serving. The third thing that I really like learned and focused on while reading this was, or while reading all 5 of these books, was that, you know, morality has always been an iffy thing in politics anyway. Like, we're talking about politicians here. It's a cutthroat world. You know, we say they're for the people, but really they're not. But I think it became more visible during the Trump administration. Everything for Trump was based on loyalty. If you weren't loyal, you couldn't stay. And figures have been pulled, and Trump has had the highest turnover rate with his cabinet and the people who they call like his A-list, which are high-ranking officials that don't necessarily sit in the cabinet. The highest turnover rate in the current history of presidents. Like, that's awful. Like, people were getting fired left, right, and center, or people were leaving because they're like, I can't do this. Like, this is too much. I can't do it. I mean, in every book that I read, it was just constant, like, somebody was being told they had to go, or somebody was making the decision that, like, I can't be a part of this anymore. I've got to pack my bags. I've got to leave. I think that says a lot. And not just in presidencies, like with any job, turnover rate is a huge thing. Something about a company or an organization is not right when their turnover rate is extremely high. And then you think about loyalty that, as much as Pence was kind of like the silent lapdog to Trump, like Pence, and I have my personal feelings about him, but like this man was extremely loyal to the end. And when Pence refused to turn over or reject the electoral votes, Trump was willing to turn against him too, because for him it was a break in loyalty. He felt like he wasn't being loyal, and he should have been loyal. And that's fascinating, because then, you know, when we saw the insurrection happen, you know, they were saying like, hang Pence, like we need to find Vice President Pence and essentially kill the man. And that's so dangerous to work on, not a sense of morality, but a sense of loyalty. And if you weren't loyal, it's not the way democracy is supposed to work. Like, when I think about loyalty and you getting cut off because you're not loyal, I think of like dictatorships and monarchies. When a king is pissed, you piss him off because you're not being loyal, that's treason, and your head gets chopped off. That's what I think. I don't think about US presidents operating in the same way. And, you know, people who were not loyal and not even a part of the cabinet, not part of the A-list, were really, they were punished as well. This was really evident in midnight in Washington, when you had people who were testifying against the Trump administration. There's a particular instance where a soldier, and I can't remember what his name is, but he was due for a promotion, and he was supposed to get this promotion not too long after he testified. And as soon as he testified, because he felt like it was the right thing to do, he felt like it was his obligation, and he felt like he was doing the right thing, he got blackballed. He ended up leaving the military because he never got the promotion that he had been promised, because of the fact that he decided to speak out. So loyalty was something that was more powerful than anything else in this administration. The fourth thing that I kind of learned from this whole entire reading experience is that Trump had a childlike nature that was really disturbing for me personally to read about. I really saw this childlike nature kind of come to fruition when Bob interviewed him in the second book in the Trump trilogy. And you really hear Bob trying to ask him some fair questions. So when Bob was asking these questions, he was truly trying to get questions and say, like, this is your time to really create your own narrative of how you want people to remember your presidency. I'm not here to set up any tricks or to corner you. Like, this is your time to set this story straight. And Trump just couldn't get off of like, but me, look what I did. Mommy, look at me. Mommy, look at me. Like, this, like, a lack of attention that was not, like, there was a lack of attention, like, childhood wise, that seems now was like translating into adulthood, which was extremely strange to kind of hear, because they listened to this on audio, where he had the opportunity to kind of lay the framework for how he wanted to be remembered as a president. And it still was about me, like, look at me, look what I did. And he wouldn't answer the questions, and he's just, it's very much childlike, like toddler, I need your attention, or I can't function without your attention, and the praise and being glorified. And it's very narcissistic, to be honest with you, but I'm not a professional, so I'm not here to diagnose anybody. And then, you know, it was like the lack of accountability. And then, you know, we could talk about like the Twitter nonsense. I was laughing because Adam Schiff narrated his own book, Midnight in Washington. I thought it was just beautifully done. One of the best out of the 5 that I read. It is the best out of the 5 that I read. And even him talking about the fact that, like, you know, Trump would get on Twitter and just like harass him, like pencil neck Schiff, shifty Schiff, and, you know, his head looks like a watermelon on a pencil stick. It's just like, you know, it's funny, but then at the same time, like, you're in a professional position. Like, you are the most powerful person in the world, and you should not be taking to Twitter and doing things that you're doing. It's very childlike in nature. It's very adolescent based. Like, this is what teenagers do. This is what kids do. You're 70 something years old. Why are you acting like this? It's extremely strange. And honestly, like, it's the same social media crap and childlike stuff that got us into so many issues with North Korea and Iran, and he almost put us in some pretty tight positions that people kind of had to save him from and do outrageous things to stop him from making some crazy mistakes that would have created some very, very tricky situations. But I think the icing on the cake for me was an incident that I learned about in reading Betrayal, where I had no idea that after Trump contracted COVID and they took him to the hospital and he got it wasn't FDA approved, but he got kind of like different drugs in order to help him, of course, you know, heal faster because he's the president. So they're going to do everything they can to save his life. We all saw the video of him taking off his mask and basically saying that COVID's really not that big of a deal. Well, first of all, that in itself is a problem because the care that he received as president of the United States was not going to be the care that anybody like us was ever going to receive. That was issue number one. What I did not know is that he had actually asked if it would be possible for him to wear a Superman shirt under his button-up shirt, and he could stand on the balcony and rip his shirt open and there'd be a Superman shirt underneath. Y'all, I cannot. I was like, this is not real life. Childlike. It's very childlike, and it's so disturbing. It's disturbing on so many different levels. And the last thing that I learned, which is something that, it's not something that I learned, but it's more like it reaffirmed my belief that the US government is a mess. Like, it's a mess. And to be a superpower and to be like, you know, the greatest in all the world, like, it is a mess and it's very fragile right now. And I'm always amazed about some things that happen that nobody found strange. There was one specific incident in Betrayal that really blew my mind about how like wacky our government got at one point during the administration. There was this woman who tried to say that during the election there was a conspiracy by Italy. They were using satellites to change votes from Trump to Biden. And they actually ended up calling it Italygate. This person, this woman, had access to high-ranking officials in the US government. And this woman also was pretending to be an heiress, right? Was pretending that a $30 million mansion, I believe it was in Virginia, belonged to her when it really didn't. She just somehow got access to it because of some real estate things. Like, I don't know if she became a real estate agent or something, but she would pretend like the house was hers. She would hold meetings there and events there, and the house never belonged to her. And I'm thinking, like, in what world does someone who gets off on playing an heiress, pretend heiress, have access to tell government officials to meet them in obscure places to talk about Italygate, about how the Italian government was using satellites to change votes? It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling when I think about stuff like that, when I think about the insurrection, because that was detailed in all three of the books, or yeah, in 3 of the books, in Peril, in Adam Schiff's book, and in Betrayal. When I think about the insurrection, the details that came with the insurrection in each one of these books, because each one of them, I think, well, not with Bob's book necessarily, but I know that with Adam Schiff and Jonathan, it was different because they talked a little bit about their experience and where they were at the time that it was happening. And I just am stuck on the fact that our nation's government is just such a mess and so fragile, and that I don't know if we will or how we're going to recover from this, because yeah, we're a two-party system. Well, we want to maintain, well, Dems and Republicans want to maintain a two-party system, because anytime anybody else wants to come in and be like, no, we need to be more than a two-party system, they completely just lose it. They lose their minds. They can't fathom it being anything but a two-party system. I get so interested in the fact that things are so divided in terms of like party lines. Issues now are just straight party lines, no shifting, no crossing over. Nobody wants to cross the aisle and work. It's just very just negative energy to the point where I feel like nobody can even work together to get anything done for the betterment of the people. And for me, that's extremely disturbing because we have elected these officials to better serve us. And a lot of them, I'm not going to say all of them because I don't work in definitives, but a lot of them are working in their own self-interest. And it's disturbing to see stuff like that, that money now, and money has always been an issue, but it is even more now apparent how much of this is about maintaining power and maintaining salaries instead of doing the right thing and making decisions that are best for the American people. And I read all 5 of these books, and it just made me truly believe that this presidency brought a lot of stuff to light. It's not saying that the issues weren't already there, but it brought them to light and people feel comfortable standing in truths that are harmful to all of us. And it's disturbing and it's scary. And while I am super into politics, I'm very nervous about what the next couple of years are going to look like. And it's just, it's rough. But those are some takeaways that I got from reading these 5 books. I don't know what to tell y'all to comment at this point. But if you're interested in reading any of them, definitely check them out. I think if I had to recommend one that was like my favorite, like I said before, it would probably be Adam Schiff's book, Midnight in Washington. It is such a good narrative style. Like, his writing was just really good. I was like, oh, this was really, really interesting. And he details some aspects that I think the other 4 books don't detail, namely about the role that he played when we saw President Trump get impeached for the first time. And he details a whole bunch of stuff that happened, like leading up to that process, during that process, and what happened when they tried to impeach him for a second time. Like, it goes into a little different side of the administration than what we get with the other 4 books. So if there's one that I highly, highly recommend picking up, it definitely would be Adam Schiff's book. But as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. And I'll be back with another video soon.